All right, I am really running on empty this week. I've just forgotten how to sleep, waking up super early every day. Not great. But we're gonna try to commentate this game of Closed. We got nothing to see currently, but let's talk a little about the set. Because I don't know what I'm talking about, so let's find out. All right, all normal rules in effect. I'm gonna pop open. Really should have done this in advance, you'd think. Gonna pop open the rules. I think these are two quite interesting hand makers. Stuff tends towards the lame, but usually a pretty like well optimized version of the lame. I think he does that very nicely. And if you look back at a previous video I did about trying to figure out who was getting hand advantages in tournaments, he does manage to do so quite consistently from the small data set we have on him from specifically Triad Wars 16, I think. So it should be interesting to see what he comes up with. Our rule set, by the way, is level 8 through 10. All decks must use at least two level 8s and one level 9. So it's likely to be two 8s, one 9, two 10s. All cards must have different number combos, no rares. Okay, so you can't do obvious pairs on the level 10s or the level 8s, which is interesting. And okay, we see Tezuka start with a 5 starter that I assume his hand is built around. Because the thing I was going to say was Tezuka is also a very interesting and creative hand maker. And because his hand making tends to be odd, it'll be interesting to see him play hands in a closed format because I think they'll be difficult to predict. They'll have curious synergies. Now, he's known for using a Dragon Lance in 5 hand. And this card strikes me as somewhat similar. So we might think, what are the cards he tends to use around Dragonlance that play off it? So Dragonlance is A513 or A315. I think it's A513. Doesn't matter too much. He likes to use it with Uber, and I would expect there to be maybe something like 5A59 or 595A. I always forget which one Sid is, and there's a new one that I think is the other way, but maybe it's the opposite of Kamari. It's probably the opposite of Kamari. I'm not sure. But that seems like a card he could use here. That has the plus wall in 2. It has synergy in 8. It even has potential plus wall setups in whichever of 4 or 6 the 9 faces in on the 6. Seems a possible card that might fit the Uber role. What other cards does he use in that hand? I don't remember. Hmm. One thing I think he tends to do is there are sort of two classic ways to build 5 hands. Hands that start in 5. One is I want to set up to be able to attack lots of stuff. So there, a card like Sid might really benefit. Sid can attack a lot of stuff. Sid has combo potential. Um, Maybe you intend to follow up in 4 or 6 and have Sid be a side-to-side sweeper, that kind of thing. The second version, though, is I have big corner setups and then I have the ideal cards. So imagine this card was with, I don't know, let's say Quistis, 9-6-A2. And then there's another card in the hand that has a 9 down and a 2 to the right. And that could go in 1 and set up Quistis to have both sides. Now, this is not a great setup card for that because it's really good if that card gives you multiple setups. In that case, Quistis only has 4, and Quistis was already good in 4 before that card in 1 was played. And it gives Quistis 2 as well, but this is low upside for this kind of setup. But one classic way to do so is you pick 4 very similar cards and one opposite. So, for instance, a hand I quite like is 8-7, A4, and 5. And then you play Cypher in 1. And A4, 8-7, the opposite of 8-7, A4, naturally has the same wall in 2 and a plus wall in 6. But now it has a plus in 2 and a same in 4. And that card just can keep powering up. And then if I have the chance, I play something like 8-7, 8-6, and 7. And that gives me a plus, same in 8 and a same in 4. Cypher doesn't have to go in 1. Cypher could go in 9. That gives me a plus in 6 and a same in 8. Cypher could also go in 3. It can go in any square except for 7. And by having these cards, you can set up in tons of squares. I think Tezuka is more in the former category. I think he has some setups. He has some intended setups that he has worked out. But he is looking for cards that synergize to attack interesting things, I think, more than he's looking for just what is the card that maximizes my setups. Um, and that makes it, for me, harder to predict what he's going to be doing here. We also saw he used his level 9, which means he can have pseudo pairs left in his remaining cards. Like, you can't have Squall Cipher, but you could have Squall Cipher Lock, right? Lock is A459. It's not quite the opposite, but it's really close. Um, and you could have that sort of pseudo opposites on both your level 8s and your level 10s. So it is quite likely, if it was any other player than Tezuka, I would be thinking he has four corners and they're two pseudo pairs. But Tezuka is not so straightforward a player. And I think like doing the straightforward thing has a lot of upside in open. In closed, it can give away information. And I don't know how important that is. It's really hard for me to adjudicate how good players are at judging closed information. You can see me playing TTAC 14. I think that's the best example of me trying to do so. And I think I did really well there, if you go back to those videos. So I think there definitely is value to be gained. I'm not sure how much value people are getting out of it, trying to read hands. Maybe for most players it is a fool's errand. I don't know. I do think there is value there. And as a commentator, it's going to be what I focus on because I do not know the hands. So, like, what else am I going to focus on? Stuff has played his corner for 9. This, again, I think the pseudo corner strategy makes sense. He may easily be on corners for 1 and 9 on his level 8s, corners for 3 and 7 on his level 10s, and his level 9 is some kind of utility card. It could be anything. It could be a second corner, likely for 1 of 1 or 9, because the level 8s are weaker. It could be a sort of mixed value card. 7676 is available. Ray loves that card, and that's a very good card. That kind of thing's available. Slightly more directed versions of that, 7766 or something of that ilk. Very possible 8766, something like that. Okay. Bart's goes down. Now, Bart's may not have an obvious pseudo pair. If we're thinking what level 10 goes best with that, there's no opposite A964. Obviously, you couldn't run that. There is 9A64, which is not quite the opposite. But off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of 9A XY corners for 7. And I'm going blank. 9A. There's lots of A9, but like A955 is a very popular one. Fafnir. Uh, is that Fafnir? I forgot what that card's named. But A955 is a very popular one. But is there a 9A? Again, Tezuka is not a player I should be predicting to pseudo pair. This is also so Stuff played a half strong corner. He created half a challenge, and Tezuka is doing, I think, a very reasonable thing, even though he's used higher level cards first. The downside of how he's played this is he has 2 level 8s for his last 3 moves, and he will have to use all his cards. So his level 8s are going to have to land. The upside of what he has done is 469A, despite having captures both ways on the card in 3, is not really facing the action there, but it is so good for 4 and 6. But he does get rid of a card that doesn't face the card that's presumably harder for him to take, though it can take it both ways. And he puts out weak numbers. First turn loves to see like an X with all weak numbers facing out. Usually your remaining cards can clean up. This is such a good card, though, after the starter. I guess it's a little dead in 2 and 8. It has a capture in 2, but not a combo. Oh, I'm really curious what Tezuka has. If you're Stuff here, I think you really don't want to flip 5. I think the position, like, say Tezuka's remaining card is like, his opposite-ish corner is like, I don't know, 8A56 or something. And he has some other ways to flip 5. Like, if you flip 5, all the combo potential is controlled by your opponent. I think you don't want to flip 5. And I don't think you want to go into an X, though you can if you have really high numbers facing out that you can also play safely with, if you can pose a challenge. And the argument for doing that, actually, I think is kind of decent here, which is your opponent has less power than usual. So if you go in 1 or 9 with high numbers facing out that you can safely play next to in 1 of 6 or 8, and they go for the X, you can pose challenges. You can say, now you have to take this A if you want a chance to win. And there might be a good case for doing that because level 8s, unless you go the 9-9 corner route, which I don't think Tezuka would go with, are just not that likely to be able to take A's playing off like 4s, 6s, 5s, 2s. It's just not that likely. You know, you see cards like 8-7-6-5 as we see here. So I really don't like this move, obviously. I think you don't want to flip 5. So I think there was an argument for 1 or 9. It's not an argument I like. I would have played in 2, 4, 6, or 8. But I think there have been some debates over this. I think 1 and 9 in those positions might be a little undervalued. I think, but I think 2, 4, 6, and 8 are so often better. Like, it's not that 1 and 9 are that bad. It's that 2, 4, 6, and 8 are a little more promising. But I think basically what you want to do is slide in 1 of 2, 4, 6, and 8. Slide meaning something weak to 5. And hopefully with a highish number facing out, and get rid of the square you have the least combo potential in. And you should have a little combo potential, right? Like 2 should be a good square for stuff, because Stuff had the opportunity to set up 2, right? He got to play the card in 3, so he got to set up 2, and hopefully 6 as well. So he had the chance to create some synergies. 2 and 6 should be his best squares. Now, in a vacuum, if you're choosing which to go in of 2, 4, 6, and 8, let's assume you have 2 and 6 and you don't have 4 and 8. You want to go in whichever, in general, of 4 and 8, if you can slide in both. You want to go in the one. There's sort of two versions of this. One level of thinking is you want to go in the one that is diagonal from the square you're best in. So if you have something for 6, but you're great in 2, or let's say you're great in 6. You're great in 6. You have a same in 6. You're really excited about that. You have like 2, 6, whatever, 8, 8. Or 2, 8, 8, 8, 6. 2, 8, 8, 6. You have something really good for 6. You're also happy in 2, but you love 6. Then you go 8, because the natural responses for Tezuka here are 2 or 4, occasionally 9. But he's basically never going in 6. So if 6 is your best square, the way to guarantee it stays open is to play an 8. If 2 is your best square, you go in 4. If 4 is your best square, you go in 2. If 8 is your best square, you go in 6. And this makes sure that your best square stays available for you longer. The other way to think, and this is going to take a little more calculation to say, is if you're planning out this endgame, say you slide in 8 and they go in 4 to lock in their card in 7. So we're going to queue. Usually your best plan there is to go in 1 of 2 or 6, again sliding, and then combo back through 2. Or combo back through 6, whichever is the other one. And generally, the square you want to be comboing through, that it's easier to slide into for that final slide in the queue. So we slide in 1 of 2 or 6, and then we combo in the other. It is easier to slide in 2 because there's that A facing towards it. And the better ways, so you're going to do 2 slides. We're going to slide out of this slash structure. Sorry if this is hard to follow. Out of this slash 3, 5, and 7. You're going to slide, say you slide in 8, and then you're going to slide in 1 of 2 or 6, right? Oh, we do see Fafnir. All right, so we did see a kind of pair here. And Tezuka is left with his level 8s, and they are almost certainly corners for 1 and 9, which means they are well powered for the remaining game, but low power. That's really going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But to finish what I was saying, because like one person watching this will follow this and think it's insightful and smart. I don't have a specific person in mind, just good chance one person thinks so. So if there's cards in 3, 5, and 7, and you're sliding somewhere, you're sliding in 1 of 2, 4, 6, or 8. and they're setting, and the most common reaction is a Q. Say they set up a Q. Here we saw a Z, but say they set up a Q. So if you go 2, they're going 6. If you go 4, they're going 8, and etc. etc. Um, you want your second slide option to be diagonal from your first slide, such that when you slide the second time out of the queue, both the cards they can capture in the corner they can play that has access to both your cards, both are comboed directly back and out of range of the card they will play in the final corner. And you that'll have made sense to someone. It's a really important concept, but it is hard to talk out. Um, and usually you don't have enough options in your hand that you can really play to it, but it's important. Okay, maybe I could have said that better if I had slept at all, but what you gonna do? Okay, so Tezuka has 2 level 8s left. We know this. What are level 8s good at? 8-7-6-5s are really plausible. They're not so good at taking 10s, and they're especially not good at taking 10s with the numbers facing out that we have. Right? Like there's very little chance, like say you play a 10 down from 6. What are the odds Tezuka can take it? Well, 8-7-6-5s, no matter the configuration, cannot. 9-8-5-4s could only take it if it was like 5-4-8-9 or 5-8-4-9. And I don't think those cards either are available or going to be run. They're 9-8-4-3s. You have to line up the 8 and the 4. And it's just not happening here because those cards are going to be 1 and 9 corners. And there's no 1 and 9 corners that can figure that way. However, this could be taken by a level 8, right? 9-3-4-8, if that exists, like the corner facing that way actually has more plus wall potential. I think Tezuka has an easier time taking the A on the backside than it would on the front side. He probably still can't take it. I like this move. But I think his odds there were better. Now, Tezuka had not seen much of Stuff's hand. And Tezuka apparently didn't have a clean thing to put in 4, and Fafnir may have been kind of dead for the rest of the game. One interesting idea Tezuka could have tried, I know I just said this wouldn't happen, is if he had a big setup in 1, which there is a decent chance he should have had there, given his starter. If he puts Fafnir in 6, because 5 has flipped, he can then land with the 1 setup later, and if he has both sides and all the captures, then he can't lose there. And that can be a way to force a tie occasionally, but it's when you're trying to force a tie. I think Stuff is doing very well here. I did not like the move in 8. Maybe he had some better read on the hand than I did, and I do think he played well on the directionality of attacking the card that Tezuka had just played. Because especially in a hand game, you're probably running corners for each side. Tezuka plays his corner for 3, and Stuff plays a card that says, you wish you still had this corner for 3. Yeah, and I think Stuff is probably doing quite well. Now, if Tezuka can play in 1, then Stuff will have a question of like how much risk does he want to take, potentially. But if Tezuka had 6, he's going to play 6 now. So he probably doesn't have 6. Now, Stuff has used his A up, which means if Tezuka has, say 2 9-8 corners, a 9-8 corner for 1 and a 9-8 corner for 9, I'd probably just play the 9-8 corner for 9 in 6. But then you can just, well, then it's a little tricky, but then you can just die if Stuff has a combo in 4 and you don't have play back. But 4 is the least likely square for Stuff to have a combo. For a couple of reasons. One is Stuff has not played a card touching 4, and 2 is Stuff played an 8, which is often a move that gets rid of 4 from the game. 8's most likely replies are 2 and 4. 4 is pretty likely there. If you go 8, you usually have to be fairly comfortable with 4 getting taken up. So he may well have it, but if you're Tezuka, I think you have to be like, okay, 4 is the least likely square for him to have a good card. If he has it, so be it. So I would probably go 6. If you're gonna go 1, I'm not sure this is right, but my instinct is like you should try to do it quickly. Because if you go 1 after a long think, they know you don't have everything. And if you go 1 pretty quickly, they will think you must have the setups and they will probably like acquiesce to the clear tie. And so if the safe tie for them is in fact the wrong move, then I think it's better to play quickly. I'm not sure this actually works on people. This is how my brain thinks it should, but it may well not. But I think stuff is in very good shape here. And I worry that like 469A leaving Tezuka's hand, that was just too critical a card, and he's been left with too little power. And I think he was always going to have trouble taking 10s here. But he needed combo potential through the card in 5. Oh! Well, I am completely wrong. Oh, man. As I said, Tezuka. So this is very similar to the 5A 5-9 I was mentioning. It does a lot of the same things. It has the gaps on the 6 that can take A's. It has the plus wall in 2. It doesn't have the same play in 8, but he wanted to use his higher level cards on big corners. That makes sense. But I am really surprised to see that card. The reason he was thinking so long is because if stuff has the combo in 4, Tezuka probably doesn't have 1. And this is a card that did have 1, but he's using that. This makes sense why he thought a bunch about this, because he can now lose. What's he likely to have? We've seen 4 cards in his hand. His most likely card is a corner for 1, because he has shown corners for 3 and 7, and his level 9 is kind of a card for 8. And so the part of the board he has the least, and his card 4948 is a side to side, which doesn't give you much information, slightly more right, but not really. The most vacated directions are down and right. And so he very likely has a card for that. I think stuff probably doesn't have 4, so I've now switched to thinking Tezuka is in a very good position because stuff is not likely to have another A facing up. He very likely has a level. He has 2 level 10s left. But if we look at what he's played a 2 corners. His low levels are both corners for 9, his level 8s. His level 9 is a corner for 7. So his high level cards are likely to be corners for 1 and 3. Right? You're not going to double up on corners again when you've already doubled up on the corner for 9, and 1 and 3 are the squares remaining. Now, that could mean he could play like Cypher and 1. And Cypher and 1 has a pretty good chance to tie. You know, it's not going to win because Tezuka will always be able to capture 7. I'm not saying he has Cypher. I'm just picking a card that's possible here. But I think if you have something like Cypher, if you play it in 4, I think you're just going to lose to a... Because I think Tezuka has a corner card for 1. And this is not just, this is what I'm scared of. Like, this is what we've thought the whole way. So if that's the case, you can lose if you play Cypher 4, but I think you have to go for Cypher 1, but I think you have to go for it. Oh, geez. He has that. All right, well, that should probably tie. Because we have, unless Tezuka walks into a plus here, Tezuka, I think, is very unlikely to have a plus wall on the 5. So I think he's going to have the double capture here, but not more. And level 8s do not plus wall 2s very often, like 8791, right? That kind of card does it, but I don't think that exists, because I think WeGraph is 9781 and Elena is 8197. So I don't think that exists. 1789s don't do it. 1797 does it. That is the only level 8 I can think of that might be conceivable to run. I don't know that it makes any sense with the other cards Tezuka has used. Yeah. So we see Tezuka has the double capture. The plus was more likely than the plus wall. That's enough to tie. Yeah, man. Watching closed, you really go back and forth. So I think Tezuka left himself with too little power. But it's not obvious that hurt him, because his higher level cards would not have played out this endgame particularly better. Like, sure, You'd rather the 5686 had been in 7 because your 469A would be better at the end. It would have happened to get the plus here, and it would have been able to take more things. 5686 could take anything 8 or weaker, while 469A could take anything 9 or weaker. And it, you know, maybe hits a few more good targets, but it's not obvious that having the low levels as his sweepers hurt him. But my worry is he was willing to use up too much power too early. And maybe stuff hit him with a pretty uncomfortable corner that he just didn't have a good card to put in the opposite corner. Because 4948, not super appealing to put there. And 5686, yeah, both of them, the fact that A955 doesn't really recapture them very well is kind of annoying. They're not as weak corners as you would like. And so 469A ended up being the weakest corner that he had the most play against. And it set up 5686 to have both sides. That's important. All right, that makes a lot of sense. And it does make sense that stuff went one of 4 or 8, because 4 and 8 are the squares he doesn't have and that Tezuka does. And it turns out he did have play in 4, so he got rid of 8. Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense to me. I don't like flipping 5, but if you don't care about flipping 5, then the square you want to get rid of, from Stuff's perspective, is Stuff had 2. He had a same in 2. He had a same in 6, right? He set up 2 sames for the same card. 28A6 was a house this game. Oh, A846 is a level 10. For some reason, I looked at that and think level 9, but of course that's a level 10. So he didn't have 2 10s remaining. He had a 10 and a 9. I think Stuff's remaining card very likely to be a corner for 1. We don't know what corner, but a corner. So 28A6 had 2 squares really well, so he wanted to get rid of 1 of 4 or 8. He has better play in 4 than 8. He gets rid of 8. This makes sense. Yeah, I do think this makes sense. And you probably don't. Probably his only way to slide an 8 was 28A6, which he didn't want to do because that card's so great elsewhere. His remaining level 10 maybe could have slid an 8, but probably not. Again, we don't know what it is. Probably couldn't. And even then, you might not want to use your level 10. So if you're trying to get rid of, like, I tend to look at these positions and think, how can I maximize sliding and not flip their center card? But if you're not, if you're interested instead in, I want to get rid of their good squares and keep my good squares, then his move makes a ton of sense. And it makes a ton of sense as a card to do it. And yeah, now that I see his hand, Stuff's play makes more sense to me. And also Stuff's best square, it turns out, was 6, so going an 8 made sense. After Tezuka goes 2, yeah, he made it so, okay, yeah, all right. So I complained, I think, the most about the move in 8 of any of the moves, but I probably do like how Stuff played this game more than how Tezuka did. Though I'm not sure what else to do from Tezuka's perspective. I think maybe 56865 should have been the starter. I think that's possible. The hand is a little less built to play off it. Like if you're doing that, why is 4849 in your hand? And do you need the redundancy of Fafnir and A656? I'm not sure. Fafnir does have plus walls 2 ways on the A656. Yeah, there's a lot of like latent potential to play off the card in 5 in Tezuka's hand. But against a reply in 3, it just did not come together this game. Which is going to happen some games. So that might just be one of those like, they played in a corner I don't have good play against because I can't set up well here. Oh well, got the tie, move on to the next game. And we will move on to the next game. But we will do so in another video.